Good. How are you, Bren?
Good, good. How's the quarantine going where you're at?
Meh. I mean, I'm pretty sure it's garbage for everyone. Miss seeing friends,
Yeah,
but
I feel you
outside
on
of
that.
that, yeah, hasn't really hit like my family too much. Hasn't, Kadena hasn't taken any serious hits from it, so that's good.
That's
How are you?
good. Oh, I'm surviving. I'm down in Colombia still, so I can't really complain because it's such a great country, but um, it's definitely haven't been that impacted down here as compared to what I've seen in the US. So I'm a little blessed in that respect, but
Huh?
um,
Are you somewhere rural or are you somewhere in the city?
I'm in the city actually. I'm in Medellin.
Hmm.
And they jumped on top of the pandemic pretty quickly and locked everything down, which is good. So our cases haven't been that bad over the last 6 months or so, and we're starting to come out of it slowly. I think we'll even have our flights start again pretty soon, which would be awesome. Um, but I mean, I can't complain because it's such a great city. It's warm, great people, great food, all of that. So it's like writing it out in paradise.
Yeah, that's a very, very good plan. I mean, it's a great situation to be in.
Yeah,
So.
absolutely. Have you guys been able to stay productive?
Yeah, we went remote in March 1st,
Hmm.
just because that was the point the company was at, because we had launched and there was really no reason for us to not go to a more decentralized model. And then the pandemic hit, and we just looked like geniuses because everyone was already set up with their home office. We had already been translating the culture to a distributed environment. So at the company level, it was, I mean, like everyone had the psychological hit of what the fuck. But compared to most of our business partners, we really weren't affected. There have been some places I know that have just crawled along, and understandably so. They weren't designed to be remote only, so it happens.
Yeah, well, the good thing about being in the blockchain industry, being able to develop, I mean, you can do a lot of things from home or remotely. Because I know there's a lot of businesses that have been impacted, but it's that lack of being able to be flexible, I guess.
And yeah, I mean, and some we were already like going in that direction, so it was all right. But yeah, it's been an interesting whatever. No, it's been shitty, but it's been fine.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So, what's new? What's new since we last talked in January? It's been a while.
Yeah, a bunch. So today, about 40 minutes ago, all of us at the company jumped onto a Zoom to watch the network scale up. So, like as just to recap, we started out working on a private chain and working on the smart contract language Pact, and then figured out this thing called Chainweb, which is now our main net for a public chain based on proof of work. It braids multiple chains together. So think of it like sharding, except that it's proof of work and that it actually is already shipped in production.
Hmm.
And so we launched with 10 chain network. So this is about 10 times the throughput of a normal single chain blockchain. And today we scaled it up to 20 chains. So we doubled the sharding count. No one's ever done this before, where you've had a sharded. No one had ever scaled a layer one directly without having to resort to some sort of centralization.
Right.
Uh, state sharding was something that we didn't invent the term for, but we definitely were the first ones to actually ship it. And then we became the first again today by upgrading the size of the network in production. No one's ever actually upgraded one of these things before. I mean, like making the blocks bigger technically increases throughput, but that's not really what we're talking about here. We doubled the capacity of the network while keeping everything except for the number of transactions that you can put into the system the same. So that's just this huge deal. We have that going on. We in paired with that, we've decided to open source our private enterprise blockchain, which is the
Hmm.
basically the successor to JP Morgan's first blockchain called Juno, which we then in-housed and have been working with Fortune 500s on for a few years with DeFi, like both showing a lot of potential but showing a lot of need. We
Hmm.
decided that it was a really good idea to open source Kuro, our permission blockchain, and allow people to have a lot of people in the public community that have access to enterprise grade technology that comes right out of that harkens back all the way to JP Morgan's Blockchain Center for Excellence from 4 or 5 years ago. So those are the two major things just for today. I believe that Coral will be open sourced in at least within the hour. So definitely today. And we did the upgrade. Those are the two huge things.
Nice.
Outside of that, yeah, I mean, since we last talked, we got listed on Bittrex.
Mhm.
We announced our partnership with Chainlink, collaborating with them on oracles. We were one of the leading projects on the Coinbase Rosetta announcement and implementation. We've been working with them for a while on helping to build out Rosetta. And because we're the first sharded chain, we also get to test out their approach to supporting sharded protocols on Coinbase, which is a lot of fun.
Mhm.
We got our Q3 product roadmap out. The other major thing from the DApp point of view is we have these things called gas stations, which we had the ideas about before, and I'm pretty sure we talked about before. But it was this
Mhm.
notion that you would have a smart contract that could have an account that could pay for its own gas, so that you didn't need to have if you want to go buy a CryptoKitty, for example, you needed to go and make your step one to using it was to go make a crypto wallet and get some Ethereum to then pay the gas to then use the app. And that's a huge barrier to entry for adoption. So instead, and people have been talking about how to do this for years and no one's ever actually done it, but we figured out a way to actually make as a native on chain the ability for a contract to have its own gas, which means that you can have a DApp that can onboard new users without them having to go make a wallet and go to an exchange and go and get coins for gas to run the DApp first. You can just immediately go and our basic example of this is our guest book that we have where anyone can go and sign the guest book that's on mainnet, and that contract uses a gas station that will pay the gas for that transaction without you having to go and generate a wallet or anything, but also without having to have some centralized server or some centralized service from the developers running. So those rolled out in full production in about a month and a half ago. And last thing is probably just announcing a Polkadot partnership and following up. We announced it last, I think, November, December, and followed up on it recently. We've been working with them on figuring out how to do both a fast and a slow integration. The fast integration being taking our enterprise blockchain Coro and making it a compatible parachain, kind of similar to what we did with Tendermint and Cosmos, except that we would just be taking our own chain and making it compatible, our own permission chain and making it compatible with their platform.
Mhm.
And the longer term idea of taking Pact or smart contract language and making a WASM compatible core of it so that anything that runs WASM can potentially run a compiled down version of Pact on chain. So we can take this language that has all the features that you really want for DeFi, like native governance, formal verification, and formally verified interfaces and imports that actually do inlining, so you don't have dependency issues, like with the parity multisig, bug back 2 years ago, and just be able to put on anything that runs WASM. So those are the high level ones. I figured I'd get through all of them and see, what's the most interesting to you. And I think you wanted to update me also on what the new format of your show is, and we can just figure out what to talk about while we're, on air.
Yeah, well, it seems like you guys have been busy, which is awesome. Congrats on all the developments and everything too, and all the upgrades and whatnot that came out today. What are you guys at with your TPS now? I think it was like almost 500,000, right?
Yeah, so our TPS, especially now that we have the private blockchain out, we're quoting the hybrid TPS publicly. And with 20 chains and 2 Kuros attached to it, it puts us at around, a conservative estimate puts us at around 500,000 transactions a second of capacity. Should someone want to go and actually do that full deployment? This is tested. It's running on all the technology we've been building for the last 4 years, so we know it all works. But when it comes to TPS, it's a very it's always been very difficult for people to have an honest conversation about what those numbers mean. Everyone from IBM to Oracle to all of the different quote unquote scaling projects that have quote unquote scale, and it's like, yeah, but not really. Like, we're talking about very different things. Ours is an honest number, but it's for our hybrid platform.
Right. It feels like it's from if you ever like max out the platform, which is not like something that realistically happens all the time because everyone's operating within a certain threshold. But I mean, where's that like place Kadena in terms of the other blockchains out there in terms of TPS?
So that's the hard part, because or at least it's a very nuanced conversation, because there's like a profound lack of nuance on most projects' parts, and some are more honest. Where it would put us, I would say that we're in, when you figure out scaling like we have with Chainwhip, where you have a layer one that we just upgraded to 20 chains. There's no reason we can't upgrade to 100 or to 1,000 or to 10,000 later on down the line. At that point, talking about TPS doesn't really make much sense anymore. And I know that a lot of people love to talk about huge numbers, and we have a huge number in our press release from today. But at the end of the day, like the conversation, once you figure out scaling, the conversation of what the TPS is pretty much ends because it becomes an unbounded thing. We can make the network bigger. It's a demand-driven thing, so we have to do an intentional upgrade to the network. But once that happens, we can double, quadruple, 1,000x our capacity, and then at that point, it's like, why are we talking about TPS? TPS on any network should be demand-driven. So like, there's no reason to run a 500,000 TPS system, continuously when you're still in the early stages of adoption, like we are. We're growing quickly. Our community is growing quickly. Our developer base is growing quickly. But at the end of the day, we're talking about the leader in smart contracts and in DeFi runs at 15 transactions a second, and they have no path for, they have marketing for Ethereum 2.0, but like, let's be clear, like no one really has faith in that anymore. And it's finally. So, if we're talking about this, we're already live in production. We've just shown that we can actually scale up in production. And all Ethereum's talking about is layer 2 scaling strategies. And to be clear, our hybrid platform is reminiscent of a layer 1, layer 2 scaling approach, where you run the private permission chain attached to the layer 1 and our base layer of mainnet. So, when Vitalik talks about roll-ups, like that's basically what we're talking about here. It's a layer 2 solution, and layer 2s work on any layer 1. The main thing is that layer 2 solutions are a big pain in the butt. Like, can you imagine if MakerDAO launched as a layer 2 solution? So they launched their own permission chain network that was stuck onto Ethereum instead of just launching right onto Ethereum. And like, do you think that they would be where they are today? Or do you think DeFi would be where it is today if they couldn't have just launched on the layer 1 and been able to, organically build and grow before and build up their reputation before they, decided to upgrade to a layer 2 sidechain? Same goes for like CryptoKitties. Like, I just can't imagine most of the really innovative stuff launching on a layer 2, because with a layer 2, you have to bootstrap a lot of the network security yourself, and you have to do it from day one. So, we already have the problems with the YAM token, where they screw up the code, they need to do a governance upgrade, and they can't because it's just too expensive, because there isn't enough capacity in the network to, there's enough capacity in the network, so every, gas call costs like $10, and it just kind of gets stuck and it breaks. Now imagine like, YAM, but now YAM also has to, as an added hurdle, launch their own permissioned layer 2 that's attached to the layer 1 and not screw it up. So I'm really not of the opinion that layer 2 is going to allow for innovation. I think it's actually going to significantly get in the way. I think hub and spoke is where DeFi goes after it's proven out that it can work on layer 1, like only after like, a compound has proven out that it can work on a layer 1. Will it really be going to a layer 2 in a significant way or maker? So at least those are just my, general opinions. It's remains to be seen.
Would DeFi be better off on Kadena rather than on Ethereum, based on what you said?
Absolutely. It's not really even that much of a question. It's the between the smart contract language that has formal verification built in. Like we designed, we come out of Stu and I come out of finance and regulatory on the financial side. So it's like we've seen, we have this just 30, 40, 50 years experience in that sector, and that allowed and informed how we designed the language that runs on top of the blockchain. Like Solidity and the EVM were very much a free-for-all, like, world computer, which is a cool idea, but here's what DeFi needs. Like DeFi needs something that is reliable and safe, that has 80% of the most of the things that DeFi needs should be built in as a native, like governance of a smart contract. That shouldn't be an extra contract or module you have to load. That should just be natively supported by the protocol, like Pact has. Formal verification. If your language can't be formally verified in a total way, then you shouldn't be using that language for billions of dollars of assets. Now, we can get away with not doing it for a bit, but if we're really going to scale this thing and are really going to democratize it and bring a lot of people into it, these things, smart contracts need to be very simple, clear, and safe. Now, you need the ability to have interoperability in a safe way. Parity multisig showed us that having contracts interact can spell disaster for the operators and the users of those contracts, because if a dependency that's downstream, that's upstream from a contract fails, so your contract is trying to work with the compound contract, and the compound contract locks up in just the wrong way, your contract may also get locked up and be irrecoverable. We've seen this before. So that's where, and then on top of that, you're running you're running DeFi on top of a 15 transaction a second network. So you're seeing, like at least to run any DeFi contracts, you're talking about like a $6 to $10 fee per transaction. And all of a sudden you start looking at centralized approaches and how much cheaper they are. If you can scale the base layer and then you can make the smart contract language safe, like that's where Kadena Impact comes in, and that's where we win, because these things will prove themselves out. Ethereum has shown before, and I believe it's showing, and again, I believe it's showing this again now, that its fundamental limitations limit its growth. Ethereum should have gone and taken over the world over the last 5 years. Like CryptoKitties should have been the first one. If they had Ethereum 2.0 with just some notion of scaling and scaled up mainnet and had some way of upgrading the EVM to be way safer, then it would have taken over, and I don't think there'd be many competitors of anything out there. But it has utterly failed at that. And that's really what we were trying to do with Kadena, is to have something that doesn't have those bounds on growth once the momentum starts to pick up. I mean, DeFi is hot right now, and the prices are probably going to spike through the roof over the next quarter and a half or two. But everyone knows that fundamentally, DeFi is never going to grow that big because the throughput of the network just isn't that high. And people can talk all they want about optimism and about ZK snarks and starks and rollups. Those are great and all, but for rapid innovation, those are really not the type of thing that you want to be using. And it also adds this hurdle of complexity to a already complex and very dangerous system. MakerDAO and Compound and DYDX moved heaven and earth to make safe contracts, and they managed to. But now imagine adding on, another significant layer of complexity. So I'm bullish on DeFi. I'm not too bullish on Ethereum long term. But who knows? Could be wrong.
Yeah, well, who knows in this space? I think Ethereum's fundamentally flawed and has been for a long time. And where they've really dropped the ball is they were the first mover in the space and had such a huge advantage. And now they're at the point where they got serious competition and people surpassing them, and they're still not even upgraded to this magical Ethereum 2.0 with all these things they say they want to do. I think that's hurt them the most overall, not being able to scale the way they want to and solve all these issues. DeFi is a different topic, though. DeFi is really interesting. I just don't think it has as bright of a future on Ethereum as it might on a different platform similar to Kadena. And I mean, in terms of scalability, what are your guys' next steps in terms of scaling Kadena, or are you guys where you want to be for now?
Right now, we're where we want to be, but that's not to say that we have, all the capacity that we could ever want. It's to say that, two things got proven out over the last year. One was that you can launch a sharded proof of work network. That happened, back in January when we launched. And the next just happened in, this August, today, that you can scale that up. That you can actually take the number of shards, you take the number of chains and double them. So the next milestone for us would be 50 chains, but that's really just dependent on the ecosystem. If the ecosystem starts to really develop and we start to grow incredibly quickly, then that gets prioritized to happen quickly. But otherwise, we have ample capacity for now. One of the things that we argue a fair bit on Discord and Telegram about with people from other platforms is that I'm not a believer that gas should be very expensive. I think the price of gas should be along the lines of the price of grief. Like you don't want to have gas be free because that means that people can just grief your system, and that's annoying. So you want to make it just expensive enough that it's a barrier to griefing. But you don't want gas to be driving the value of your token, because that, once you have gas that, because it's a scarce resource, can go up in value dramatically, That also means that you have a network that the capacity of it is a scarce resource and it will limit your growth long term. I get that for the last 3 years, a lot of people have been talking about, it's going to be the scarcity of the tokens use that is going to drive the price of this thing up. For a dApp, I buy it, or in theory, I buy it. But for a layer one protocol, I don't. The gas is there for rate limiting and for DOS protection, but really shouldn't be something that is driving the cost of your network, because once it can have a value, once it can have a cost that's higher than the cost of just stopping griefers from griefing, then there's no bound to how high that price can go. And we're seeing that with ETH right now, where people are like, wow, DeFi is really cool, but man, it cost me $9 to make a Gnosis multisig contract. That's ridiculous. Hey, why don't they just have multisig as a native, which is a really good question. We have it as a native, it's not that hard. But also just, make a new contract costs $9 just to do multisig. You should be able to make, multisig contracts for like less than a penny. But again, there's different camps in this.
How does Kadena, from a technical standpoint, avoid having the same issue that Ethereum has with high gas fees, or when you have all that throughput and when you're trying to scale things up? Like how does that differ?
So the gas in Ethereum, just like the fees in Bitcoin, are driven right now by just the limited network capacity. So it's feasible in Kadena that we could have a period of rapid growth where the network becomes saturated and then the gas fees do start to go up. But unlike Bitcoin and unlike Ethereum, as we've seen today on August 20th, when we upgraded to 20 chains, we can increase the network capacity to add more capacity. So let's say that on 20 chains, by the beginning of January 2021, we've had multiple stable coins and a few decentralized exchanges come on board, and we're starting to see 50% on average plus utilization of the entire network. We're talking like 500 transactions a second there, and something along those lines. And once we start to see that, then it's time to start talking about making the network bigger. Because the last thing we want is for the network to have explosive growth and for the capacity of the network to not be there to allow that growth to happen. So if we manage to not be able to scale the network, to scale up in production like we've proven that we can. So now it's not really a question, but still getting used to it, because I used to have to talk theoretically about, in theory, we should be able to scale up the network and increase the number of shards. Now that we've done it, now we can do this. It's now a proven thing. So it's really just at that point about timing and making sure that you're ahead of the curve. And DeFi moves fast and crypto moves fast, but it doesn't move that fast. Like the idea that you're going to go from using 5% of the network capacity to a continual usage of 100% of the network capacity, which is then what starts to drive the price of gas up. And I don't really see that happening in under a month or two. And that's how long it takes to do one of these upgrades. So that's how we do it, is like gas prices now are a function of networks not being able to scale, of ETH 2.0 not launching, and Bitcoin not really wanting to scale up their base layer, and that's okay. But the way that we avoid it is that we crack scaling. We can just make our layer one bigger as the community demands it, and then that also negates the ability for competitors to come in and to try to poach things that we can't service. Right now, most of the DeFi projects, the people that we've had trouble talking with over the last couple of years, are now much more interested in talking with us, because a lot of people are looking for a plan B, because they don't really buy Ethereum 2.0 as something that's ever going to actually exist in the way that it's been pitched and that's actually going to scale. They think a proof of stake chain might exist, but the idea that they're going to have a sharded proof of stake network that's safe and launches anytime in the next 3 years, I don't really know anyone that buys it anymore. 2 years ago, yeah, a lot of people thought that they could pull it off, but now, not so much. Maybe Beacon Chain, but that's about it.
Gotcha. Have you guys had any applications launched yet? I saw that you guys had a COVID blockchain application or something like that.
Yeah, so we put that one together, and that one launched out on the platform. That one hasn't gotten a lot of uptake just because the market has moved since oddly enough, the market for COVID testing has moved to rapid on-site diagnostics, because there's a fair amount of faith in our global and national institutions. It's gotten lost. So anyone with a piece of paper that says, "Oh, I got a COVID test in the last 48 hours," like, no one really buys that anymore. So instead, it's gone to just on-site testing instead, which is unfortunate. We have had Blend open source, and Blend is, I think, the newest West Coast unicorn. They do commercial mortgages. They do retail mortgages, and they just open sourced their FinPrint app, which was effectively, it was going to be a attempted takedown of the Equifax credit services, or at least something close to that. And they ended up shelving it just because of market timing. We have a stablecoin app that we have a few different stablecoin apps we're talking to that we have basically out in our testnet that we're helping to get kitted up. One of our community members just launched a token, basically just to show how freaking easy it is. And the announced USCF partnership from a couple years ago, we've been continually working with them, with the regulators, and we're hoping to have a significant update come September. But admittedly, things got a little bit delayed because of the pandemic. So September is like what we're hoping for, but it might end up being closer to October. But that's something that we can't go too much in the details on, just because of how sensitive it is and because of how it relates to governments and regulators.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of sad that the government isn't using blockchain as much as they could be. With the pandemic, like what are some of the benefits of being able to use like a COVID blockchain application? So I imagine you'd be able to track all these cases and figure out where everyone's going, and everyone could have a health record. I feel like it's just such a better system. I'm surprised that they haven't jumped on it more.
Yeah. You can add to that also, doing supply chain tracking for the quality of the testing kits. This is initially when we were building out the app where we were focusing it, because there was this issue of these fake kits coming over from across the world for testing. And the idea was that at the manufacturing site, you could have basically a private key be given to the test, a one-time use private key. That meant that to use the test, you'd have to go and scan the thing. And if that test had gotten cloned because one of them was fake, that private key would also get cloned. And private keys work really well for authenticating, they should be unique. So if you end up taking a test and I end up taking a test, and when we go in and we do the scan of this QR code to go and look on the ledger to say, it's like, hey, I got tested and here's my results. If you got tested first, I go and I scan that private key and I find out, hey, you know what? There's someone else, I don't know who, because it's all private data, but someone else scanned this private key already. So I know that this test, that either his test or my test are fakes. And I don't want to use this test. And it's also a cool thing because you might have gotten the fake test early. And then you can actually go and check later on. It's like, hey, did anyone show up with this private key that my test came with later on? Maybe that casts some doubt onto the validity of my test too. But it's unfortunate, but the federal government has just absolutely let us down in the US on this. And it's been a catastrophe. So, anything short of just like an utter meltdown, I'm pretty much just happy with at this point. I'm just expecting and I'm really not looking forward to what the next, what the fall and the winter is going to look like in the US. It's going to be a mess.
Yeah, I don't think the situation is going to get that much better too quickly. Heading into the fall, heading into the winter, that is flu season. So it's just going to propagate the whole coronavirus pandemic even more in a lot of places, especially in the US. And yeah, the federal government has not handled it well. And it's just sad that some of this technology isn't being utilized when it could, rapidly help resolve the issue. But that's just the world we live in, I guess.
It's the country that we're from. I don't know. It's not, because everywhere else did it way better. So
yeah. Well, yeah, actually Colombia did a pretty good job. Everywhere I go, I'm pretty much tracked. If I go to a mall, if I go to Starbucks, if I go to the office, they're taking my ID down. They're taking my temperature. They're spraying my shoes, washing my hands. Like, it's very, very controlled. They know where everyone's going during the pandemic. They don't use blockchain either. They probably should, but at least they're tracking it better.
They did something that works. That's really all that matters.
Yeah, it's helped a lot. They've done a few stupid things that aggravated it. But other than that, they've done a pretty good job. And there's some other countries that have too. I remember you mentioning earlier, KDA was on Bittrex, right? Correct?
Yeah.
Is that newly on Bittrex, or are you guys on some other exchanges, or what's the plan there?
So we got listed on Bittrex a few months ago. Yeah, so we got listed on Bittrex a few months ago. It was awesome. They did a great job, and Bittrex global team was fantastic, and they did a pretty good integration. And it's been awesome to just get onto a real exchange, top 25 real volume exchange, and it's been really good for the for the community, for the coin, just for publicity, also just for market access. And yeah, I mean, recently a small exchange came to us and asked. Basically, they told us they wanted to list us. They're called Coin Metro. They're very low on the volume scale, but they're a kind of an up and coming exchange. They care a lot about AML, KYC, legal reg. They operate both in the U.S. and in the EU. And they came to us and were just like, hey, we like your project a lot. We want to list you. We're not going to ask for a fee or anything, but can you help us with some questions? And they have so far, I think, done the best job of the actual integration itself. But Bittrex Global did a quite good one too. It's just that a small exchange you get to work with you need to really work directly with the entire engineering team to make sure the integration is perfect. But the most fun stuff that we've been working on when it comes to exchanges is definitely Coinbase's Rosetta. And Rosetta, I don't know if you saw the press release from them, but it's their approach to streamlining the listing processes. And it's this idea that a project can build against this API that the Coinbase team has defined, and that that Coinbase could then build against that implementation, and that will bring down the amount of time it takes them to launch a new coin on their exchange from taking anywhere from 3 to 12 months down to about 6 weeks. So we've been working with Coinbase on that for I think it was since like February, and we're the first and I think only state-chartered protocol to have gotten through the integration. It's been a lot of fun. We've gotten to find some interesting edge cases, because if we're the only sharded thing out there, then of course we're going to find like the bugs that other people can't find, because we're the only ones who are testing their notion of what a subnetwork means and how a shard works and how to get them up, and then how to get everything updated. But Rosetta is really cool also because I think it's going to be one of those things that projects from now on, whether they're ERC20 tokens or tokens on top of the platforms, or just base layer protocols, are going to preemptively do integrations with, just because it's going to streamline the process of getting listed, I would suspect, at other places too. Because once you have Rosetta integration as a project, any platform that has the ability to integrate with a Rosetta implementation can then just pick up that integration that the project did and list that token in no time at all. So it's kind of like there's certain wallets where you can go and submit pull requests to add your coin to them. It's kind of like that, but for exchanges. And I think it's just a really cool idea.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think the timeline would be to get on Coinbase at this point in time? Because I know a lot of people are trying to. They've been very selective.
And also a lot of people don't talk about it because you're explicitly told not to. So I can't really comment much on it at all.
Yeah.
It just Rosetta is I can just pare back part of what the press release kind of underscore or underline like the most important bits of the press release, which is that one of the things that they've identified that they need to do better is listing more assets faster, and that's what Rosetta is designed to do. And we've been very lucky in having a ongoing relationship with Coinbase, and being informed about and invited to help with being in the first cohort of people to actually go and build against Rosetta from the project point of view, and to work with their team on getting to polish different parts, identify bugs in other parts, help to redesign other parts. So overall, it's been great. But as timelines go, the first thing they tell you when you start working with them is you can't tell them. You can't talk about it.
No worries. But what is it that's like slowing them down? Is it just like a logistics issue, or?
I don't know. I don't know. They've identified it as an issue. I think they brought in a new head of product, but we can't really speak to how that process works. I don't really have that much insight into it. The people that we work with are great. Rosetta, I love the idea of, and it's been great to get into their blog posts on Rosetta, to get into press with them. be on the Rosetta homepage, all this stuff. But you know, I mean, our experience of working with them has been very positive. It's just, I don't know. Yeah, I'm really the wrong person to go and ask. I think probably someone who used to be.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, no worries. I was just kind of curious. But before we wrap up, I have one more question. What do you guys, you know, what's your timeline look like for the rest of 2020, for the rest of this crazy year?
Timeline. So our timeline is, I mean, finish up the Rosetta implementation pretty quickly. So let me go and pull up my Q3 roadmap that we just pulled out. So we like to do a Q3 roadmap that has actual dates, and then Q4 that is just kind of like the ideas of what we think is going to be there, because crypto just moves so fast. So, you know, one of the things in Q3 we did was sharing an update on the Chainlink collaboration. You know, we scaled up our proof of work chain to 20 chains. This is in August. You know, the other stuff that we've done recently is the Polkadot Web3 Foundation update. And, you know, stuff that's coming up is we're rolling out a full developer engagement program. We've been really focused on getting like listed and scaling, and have all the different pieces for a really streamlined developer experience, and also have a language that's designed to be really easy to use. But we haven't really had them in a one kind of holistic place. Despite, you know, we actually already built out a Udacity course. The guy who did the Solidity Udacity course, we got in touch with after he did that, and he contracted us to do our Pacts kind of beginner and intermediate courses, which have been great. Other stuff, we have some updates coming on the hash function. We have some research that we've been doing in that we think we have a way to be able to have multiple hash functions being mined in parallel on the same network. And it's because we're this sharded proof of work blockchain. So we have multiple proof of work chains braided into one network. We can have theoretically, you know, 5 or 10 of the chains that are in the braid running one algorithm, and the rest of them running another algorithm. This is still, you know, earlier stages of research. We've been working on it for since I think like maybe February or March, and we think it's possible, but we realize that it's like a pretty novel form of research because no one's ever figured out how to actually have, you know, completely distinct mining communities. And, you know, the ideal long-term for us would be that we would have like one algorithm like, you know, Prog POW or E4R that's for GPUs, one algorithm that's for FPGAs, maybe probably one that's for CPUs, and then 1 or 2 that are for ASICs. This is when we scale up to 100, maybe 500 chains, and have, you know, 3 to 5 different algorithms, you know, actual mining camps that traditionally hate each other, actually mining and coexisting in a collaborative way on the network, because they would have different segments of the network devoted to their respective mining focus at a given period of time. It's this really cool idea that actually it's almost like enforced decentralization, because it would mean that, you know, the people who do FPGAs and the people who do, you know, let's say ASICs or GPUs or CPUs, they don't tend to overlap dramatically. There isn't kind of like, you know, Bitmain doesn't do all the above. Bitmain really just focuses on the ASICs versus like you know, people who do FPGAs, like I forget what his name is, Black Miner or something. They tend to focus on you know, just doing FPGA as well. So it's this idea that you can actually have multiple distinct mining ecosystems collaboratively making your platform more decentralized and more robust. Outside of that, you know, finishing up the Rosetta implementation that should be towards the end of Q3, and you know, announcing some new DeFi partnerships towards the end of Q3 as well. And then after that, it's really just, I mean, a lot of it is just starting to focus on how to bridge these different partnerships and different projects that we've been working with, so like Polkadot and Cosmos, Chainlink, and how to leverage Pact and how to leverage Coro, our permission chain that we just open sourced, to be something that can start to unify different parts of the ecosystem, and in such a way that we can actually start to provide these parts of the ecosystem that are right now kind of struggling, especially in the Ethereum side, with the technology that's at hand, provide them a bridge for being able to use Kadena as excess capacity, or use Kadena's excess capacity for doing more stuff. Like, I love the idea of bridging in a peer-to-peer decentralized way from Ethereum to Kadena and back, so that you can have things like, you know, you don't have to worry about it costing an arm and a leg to cast a vote on Ethereum because their gas prices are through the roof. Instead, you can have a governance, collecting like a vote collecting contract on Kadena's mainnet, where you can actually bridge over your vote to that contract. That contract can collect these things, and then it can bridge back a consolidated vote without having to resort to some permission chain that you may or may not trust, without trying to resort to some potentially not possible to model ZK like zero knowledge or homomorphic encryption approaches. So it's a lot of DeFi. It's a lot of just building out the community more. Continuing to hit on all cylinders where we're really seeing a lot of success, which is just beating the drum on, guys, we figured out scaling. It's actually here. We're not faking it. The future of scalability is proof of work, and this no longer is theory. It's actually in practice. We figured it out. And on top of that, the smart contract language you have is everything that you want for DeFi, and a lot of stuff you didn't even know that you wanted. So it's really just about beating the drum, continuing to gain momentum and build out the community, both in the mining, the developer side, and the retail side.
Yeah, it's awesome watching you guys grow and keeping up. So, Will, thank you for taking the time to out of your day to talk about your updates and everything with Kadena and come back on the podcast. Always fun having you. Keep me updated as everything comes out the rest of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me again. It's been great chatting.
Yeah, you too. Have a great time and stay safe.
You too. Stay safe.